Bienvenido. If you are able, please share this show with a friend, leave us a nice review on the podcast player of your choice, or if you'd like to support us financially, sign up for the companion podcast, The St. Nicholas Project on Gum Road. All these things really help us out. Namaste.
Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
I've seen Jesus play with flames in a lake of fire I was standing in. I met the devil in Seattle, spent 9 months inside the lion's den. Met Buddha yet another time, he showed me a glowing light within. But I swear that God is there every time I gaze in the eyes of my best friend. Says, my son, it's all been done. Someday gonna wake up old and gray. Go and try and have some fun, doing warmth to everyone you meet and greet, and cheat along the way. Now I gotta scroll. There's a gateway in our minds that leads somewhere out there, far beyond this plane, where reptile aliens made of light cut you open, pull out all your pain. Tell me how you make illegal something that we all make in our brains. Some say you might go crazy, then again it might make you go sane. Every time I take a look inside that old and fabled book, I'm blinded and reminded by the pain caused by some old man in the sky. Marijuana, LSD, psilocybin, DMT, these all change the way I see, but love's the only thing that ever saved my life. So don't waste your time on nursery rhymes, fairy tales, of blood and wine. It's turtles all the way down the line. So when we get other realms, our souls must roam. Yeah, that song's a good song.
What?
Even though it's a bit weird. Oh, let me finish. Problem is this. Internet apps aren't what they used to be. Hold on a sec. So don't waste your time on nursery rhymes or fairy tales of blood and wine. It's turtles all the way down the line. So to each their own till we go home. To other realms our souls must roam, to and through the myth that we all call space and time. You used to, you could get on the computer and it would like auto scroll for you.
Mm-hmm.
So But it doesn't do that. Everything's breaking.
Yeah.
It might just be me. But I was like, it wasn't scrolling. But I've had a lot of trouble with... I feel here's the problem. I feel like they made the internet, and then they just couldn't stop. And now they just keep toying with it. Like, I was trying to get somewhere last week, and I used Google Maps, right? As you do.
Mm-hmm.
Driving down the road, and then it says go forward, and I get to a point where there is no more road, and I'm in a cul-de-sac in the woods, looking at trees, and it's saying go straight, and I said it doesn't. There's no thing. I said reroute. Then I reroute. I'm going around, and then it says we found a new route, and it's the route it just tried to take me on. You know, and then so I switched to Apple Maps, and I'm driving to this place. And then it's talking to me the whole time, being confused. I've never had it say this to me before. It was we were driving. I was about to turn. It says, "Turn left in a half mile," and then like immediately after it goes, "I'm sorry. Turn left in a half mile," and just says the same thing.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, everything is. It was calling roads the wrong name. I don't know. This might just be the simulation messing with me. But apps don't auto scroll for you as you're going to pages, which is a problem. But it's okay. Have you heard that song before? Turtle all the way down the line.
No, who sings that?
Sturgill Simpson. It's the new country where it's about like drugs, like everything else is about.
Right.
Not that the old country wasn't about drugs. It's just different drugs.
Yeah.
You know, Johnny Cash they had cocaine and they had. A little bit of marijuana, though not that much back then. But they were mostly alcohol.
Right.
Painkillers. I have some friends. They're late 30s. They still smoke weed.
That's not a very grown-up thing to do, I feel.
And it's not that. And I was thinking about it. You know, it's like who pointed out? Somebody pointed out. I don't remember what it was. But it's not so much that they're druggies. It's that they're doing teenager drugs. Yeah. You should be doing painkillers or something at this point. Something grown up. You know, like a little bit of Oxycontin maybe. Something where you have to go to the methadone clinic eventually.
Go big or go home.
Yeah, I mean, like at this point, just you need like you don't smoke something when you're in your late 30s. Right, unless it's a cigar, you take a pharmaceutical.
Yeah, science, man.
Something the doctor gave you, a shady doctor.
Yeah, right.
By the way, to any of the young people out there looking for a job and you want to make money, become whatever doctor it is that hands out stuff at a methadone clinic. Because they oftentimes just operate in cash, and people just walk in and they give them like $100 and they give them a pill, and it's great for the doctor. Wow, it's not good for the. I've seen methadone clinics lined up as though it were like a department store. Just people lined up to get their fake meth. Or heroin. And methadone's actually for heroin, isn't it? It's not for meth.
I don't really know much about that. Yeah.
Methadone, I think, is a synthetic heroin substitute that's supposedly less addictive. Yet everyone still has to go every week to get theirs.
Right? Yes.
It doesn't seem like people are being weaned off of it.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
But what are you gonna do?
Does the Sackler family make methadone too?
Probably. But what we're gonna talk about today is that also is an aspect of things. It's the non-duality of the world.
The non-duality of the world.
The non-duality of the cosmos, even dare I say?
Okay.
Dare I say it? Because today, after we talk about some weird things, I want to explore the life and philosophy of Alan Watts.
Oh boy,
an interesting American.
That dude's a trip.
He's a trip. He's an interesting American. A lot of people interested in him. I know a lot about him. It's going to be fun. But I had a weird thing. What happened When did veterinarians and how and when did veterinarians convince the public that as a matter of course, just as a routine, you should chop various bits off of your animals?
Pretty sure that was Bob Barker.
Was it Bob Barker?
The Price is Right, man. Don't forget to have your pet spayed and neutered.
I mean, they did push that real hard with him.
Yeah.
And it always struck me as weird because that's a strange quote-unquote charity to be really concerned about. And he had some reasoning, like he didn't want pets to be, I think he called them homeless pets, which I always thought was sitting there going, that's just being an animal.
Well, I think a lot of cities developed stray cat and dog issues.
Yeah.
And so they took care of that, and now they have rat issues instead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. You have to have one or the other. But this is one of those I was wondering because I had a weird thing happen to me.
All right.
This week. I made some I was observing my dog. My dog is getting old as far as dogs go.
Mm-hmm.
You know. He's not super old, but he's, depending on the breed of dog, he would already be dead.
Okay.
Or he's, if he was a large dog, he would be dead.
Right.
But he's not a large dog, so we still got some time. But he's a senior citizen dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I was remarking on how he still seems to be in pretty good shape, and he's thin, and he runs around, and not as much as he used to, but he likes to play catch and all that stuff, right? And I was wondering aloud on Twitter how much of that, his youthful spryness, is a result from the fact that I never had him neutered.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, maybe he just has that. Because when dogs get neutered, they put on a lot of weight and stuff, right? And so he's still really quite thin. And so I made the comment on the Twitter that I think, because the vets push it real hard. They're like, neuter your pets. You got to get him neutered. And I was like, I don't see why. He'll be fine. And they're like, he's going to be aggressive. And that wasn't true. Really, and even if he was, he's not big enough to do much damage.
Right.
He got mad at me one time and bit me because I was trying to groom him and he didn't like that. So I guess that's a form of aggression, but it hasn't been a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then I bit him back.
As you do.
That's how you do that. You hold them down and you bite their ear, just like in that movie with the Huskies. Because that's how the dog sleds, they would establish dominance.
Mm-hmm.
If the dogs get mad at you, you hold them down and you sort of nip their ear just a little bit. And the dog's like, okay. Because that's how they understand.
Yeah, man.
So he bit me, and then I bit him. And then we were fine. Right?
We're doing that with our rooster right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hold him down and put his head on the ground.
Yes. That's what you do. But immediately upon making this comment, I said, maybe we shouldn't be just as a matter of routine neutering our animals, because maybe it's better for their livelihood, their life quality, right? And there was some troll that popped up out of nowhere and was like, this is not routine. I'm a veterinarian, and then your dog is the exception. Most dogs live lots longer and have less medical problems if they are properly spayed and neutered. And I was sitting there thinking, first of all, how did this person find my
Indeed. How indeed
post?
Did they find your post?
And like immediately, like within 5 minutes. Which makes me think that and two, this quote unquote person seemed to argue like a Reddit post.
Yeah.
Which made me think that they are not real, that they are some sort of bot, right? Which makes me think that somebody has set up machines to trawl the internet for anti-spay and neutering comments, and then just deluge them with like science rhetoric about why you should do it.
I think that is most certainly the case on probably thousands and thousands of topics.
Yeah, but then but why? But to whom does this spay and neutering matter so much to go to that length? Like that's because is it like PETA? Maybe. Is it some sort of animal extremist group? Maybe, but I don't think they're that.
Well, that's an income stream for veterinarians. I mean, it costs what $80 to $120 to get an animal neutered, depending on where you live.
It could be big veterinarian.
Yeah,
it could be.
They have trade associations that they pay membership into, and those dues go to things like advertising certain issues, or
Yes,
it's entirely plausible.
It isn't. It's entirely plausible that it's big veterinarian. But then I was thinking, is it? Have animals been used in the treatment of animals, particularly pets, because livestock and stuff is different? But has the treatment of animals been used as like a beta testing to acclimate populations to behavior they would like to then carry over into the treatment of humans?
Yes, I bet it has. That's a great observation.
Like, for instance, euthanasia.
Yeah.
And this is why this is why I think people got mad at me, because this is one of my early forays into people being mad at me online. I've been doing this this particular drum for a while. As I said, I don't think animals enjoy suicide.
Yeah.
Like, that's a human thing. I have never seen an animal in the wild try to kill itself. Maybe they do. I haven't seen all animals in the wild all the time. Maybe there are marmosets like jumping off bridges or tying vines around their neck and trying to drop from a tree, but I've never seen it, right? And no one's ever showed me this happening. I think suicide is a largely human invention. And so when people say things like, and this is the thing, they're programmed to say these words from the TV. They say things like, it's for their own good. Or to put them out of their misery. Like, these are words that first cropped up on television shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, I don't know that the dog, if it could talk, would agree that it wants to be poisoned.
Probably just wants you to pet him.
Yeah, that's probably what he wants. And people have gotten and are still mad at me for saying, and to their credit, as I'm going to talk about today, they may be right to be mad at me. Maybe it's not my place to do that, to say such things. But that behavior has pinged my radar for potential psyop, because I think that they introduce a strategy in the pets and then say, well, we do it with the dogs and it's merciful, right? Mm-hmm. Why not do it with grandma?
Yep.
Or, look, we spay and neuter animals, is that, for their own good and the good of society. Why wouldn't you get a vasectomy for the good of society?
Labor and delivery doctors put the full court press on every woman with over 2 kids to get her tubes tied. In my experience,
they do.
Yeah.
It's and yeah, they do. If you've ever been and I know some of our listeners have not been, because they're not parents yet. But if you've ever gone through the gambit of going to a hospital for labor and delivery, after kid 2, they start really, like, if you're like, we're going to have more kids, they're like, what? That's weird. Especially after kid 3. They really start to push things after kid 3. And it's a little bit like taking your dog to it's like they just say, well, now we do this. This is the normal thing. If you say, oh, no, we're not going to do that, they're like, what? And so I wonder if maybe it's bigger than big veterinarian, or bigger than, and maybe it's part of whatever this the beast is.
Well, it's all the same sort of groups of people and sorts of people that end up, when you sum up their opinions, they seem to hate life a lot.
They do. And I'm not casting aspersions on anyone's decisions to get a vasectomy or whatever. I mean, I'm going to cast a little bit of aspersions if you decided to euthanize grandma.
Yeah.
But, I'm just think about why you think that was a thing. Is that your idea, or was that implanted through social conditioning? I don't know. I really don't know. This was strange that this guy just came. It's like, how did this person find me? I didn't follow them. They didn't follow me. Is it just somebody on there just constantly searching for the words neuter?
That's also a possibility.
Could be a crazy person just doing that. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a tiny Twitter account, and I was busting on Roy Moore, formerly of the SBC, a couple weeks ago, as he was having his big temper tantrum.
As you should.
And all these randos just came out of the woodwork to argue with my post and call me a Karen. It was great. I was like, this seems a little canned. I don't know who these people are.
It seems that's the thing. It seems canned. It seems like you're getting a canned response. And plus, you always go, you could go, a great defense is like, look, I have 20 people look at this feed. Why are you so obsessed with me?
Right.
Talking to 20 people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not Kanye. I'm not Ye.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to focus on getting Kanye to listen to this show.
I think he would benefit from it.
I think he would benefit a lot from it. I think he'd agree a lot. I think he could add a lot to it. He did a great spiel about about the devil the other day, which is great.
I bet if all our listeners spam Kanye with show links, maybe by your combined forces, you can get his attention.
Yeah, I think you can. He probably needs it right now, going through his divorce.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to. I don't know. That whole situation's gotten weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, Kim doesn't even look like a human at this point. And so many plastic surgeries.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this? It's like, this is another thing. I think this is a thing with the Disney characters. And I liked Frozen. It had some good music.
Frozen was gay propaganda.
It was, but it was still, Olaf was fun. But the eyes, the big eyes of characters, they look a little bit like alien eyes.
Mm-hmm. They do.
Like gray aliens. And then people are getting these surgery. People are starting to look like aliens.
Who's that weird black guy on TikTok or whatever who's like a wizard? What's that guy about? I don't know.
I don't know.
He kind of looks like an alien.
He does.
I respect his game. He's got a cool thing going. But
he does. I like his. What would they call it if you were a kid? They call it your drip. I think.
Yeah,
they'd say.
He's got a solid drip there.
He's got which sounds gross.
Yeah.
But all the kids' language sounds gross.
Mm.
Except for Vibe. Vibe is good.
Well, it's because their aesthetic sense has been seared out of them by Rick and Morty cartoons and whatnot.
Yeah, that's true. The uglification of animation started really with Ren and Stimpy, I think.
Yeah.
And
Beavis and Butthead. Yeah, man.
But then that's not so much. They've done that. They've made that as an aesthetic choice now. But it started just as like, we don't have time to pay people to do a good job. Which is really what it was. It's like it's like a lot of it's choppy now. It's like if you're going to hand draw, you don't draw as many frames. Because it's expensive. But anyway, the other strange thing, and I think this ties in, because this is like, who's doing this propaganda thing? And then to what extent? Because so this is something Matt from Quantum of Conscience, who I've talked about before, spoke about. He did a great video on a certain bang incident. which if you don't know, I will now initiate our listeners into the code words of the deeper levels of the quote unquote truth community. Are you prepared?
I'm ready.
Okay. So a bang event is a big national media covered violent event which, real or fake, is used to artificially push some propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, real or fake. Bang. It's called a bang. We call it bang events. They happen now and again. Other like, and some to avoid automatic censorship by algorithms or getting weird veterinarian bots to attack you.
Yep.
We don't always speak of them directly, right? Not because we're worried about what people will think, but just because the algorithms pick up on the language and flag stuff. So there's the Legolas event. Do you know what that one could be?
Legolas, like the elf. I think that's an alien happening.
No, good guess. But Legolas was played by Orlando Bloom.
Oh.
Orlando bang event. Yeah, okay. That's right. That's the Legolas event. So
man, this is some pretty good like deep code here.
I know.
Yeah.
We're gonna get. Of course, you have the gambling. What was it? What do you call it in blackjack when you go over 21? Is it busting or breaking?
I think that's bust.
Yeah. The busting 21 event,
mm-hmm.
or the breaking. That's the Las Vegas shooting.
Mm-hmm.
It was gambling city. Some people have called the Holocaust the rollerblading incident. I don't know why.
Rollerblading incident.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why that one's there.
That's weird.
Yeah, but anyway, so there's some. We usually call COVID, we just call it C's. Because if you type COVID into a thing, then all the algorithms are like, they're talking about COVID. We need to get in there and see what they're saying.
Yep.
So they just say, like, recently we were discussing how Australia went insane because they had one COVID case and locked down the whole country because a German had the sniffles. And so you say, well, they were going like, they had one C. What's the problem? And so it begins to sound. It begins if you're not initiated into the language, it begins to sound just insane. Like, well, they had one C at the Legolas event. You know. So, but we're going to talk about a certain bang incident. Matt put up a great video. This was actually a bang event from 2018. So it's been a while, but we've been thinking about it. Because it's a peculiar one, because there's really no way to suss it out where reality makes sense. Like, any way you examine it from, you get a reality breakdown, sort of. And he did Matt has started his own website now called freevoice.io, and you can go view this video there if you'd like more information. freevoice.io. But it's about do you remember the Santa Fe, Texas, not New Mexico, Texas, Santa Fe, Texas school shooting in 2018?
No. There's been so many, you know.
A lot of people don't. And it's because I think they dropped it. I think they tried to push it, but they dropped it because it wasn't taking. And also because the news coverage of it was very strange. And so a lot of people don't remember it. There were supposedly 10 people killed there. They may have been. I don't know. 8 students, 2 teachers. Okay. But in the coverage, there's this kid who recently, I think last year, supposedly graduated high school. And his name was Rome Shoemaker. First of all, that's a strange name. It's not impossible. But no, it's weird that no one in these events is ever like Thomas.
Yeah.
They always have a weird...
Waynell Sexton.
They've always got... or, chauvinist, or Felonious Floyd, or it's like everyone's got a weird, or Israel Burns. They've all got a weird name, right? And this guy's name is Rome. He was a high schooler named Rome Shoemaker, He's a white kid, sort of tall, not overly tall, average, red hair. Big curly red hair.
Okay.
And so the story goes that there was one of the students, I think it was a student, he came into the school with it was a 38 caliber handgun.
Okay.
Starts blasting. People are running, people are screaming, they're getting away, some people aren't getting away. Rome is close enough to see, he sees the handgun in the person's hand, so he's not far away, right? He's not like getting shot at a distance. And the people go down, and Rome runs, and then there's this 7-foot wall, and Rome vaults over the wall, and he says, I probably couldn't have done that without the adrenaline. And I get to the other side, and I see this other guy, and he's been shot in the leg, and he's like, I'm okay, keep running. And he says, I've got a lot of blood on me. Do you think someone was shot? And he says, no, you've been shot. And I look and I see that there's blood coming out of my neck. And so I take off my shirt and I cover my neck and I keep running. Okay. This is the interview he's giving from his front porch that night, supposedly.
What?
He's not in the hospital. Okay. They say on the interview, like, earlier today, this is on the news, earlier today, you were shot in the head by a 38 caliber. And right now, Rome he's not exhibiting any pain whatsoever. He's moving his head all around while he's talking. And the only indication that anything has happened to him at all is he has a regular, like, Walgreens Band-Aid on his neck, and it's hanging off. Like, one side isn't even sticking anymore. On the side of his neck. That's it. Right? And so the news is there's this woman sitting on the thing with him, and she's like, Rome, we've talked a lot about, she's talking to her other co-anchor who's in the studio, and she's on site. And she's like, we've talked a lot about, mass shootings in the past and school shootings, and you and I covered Columbine together, and now here we have Rome, a survivor of a shooting just today, and I just and now Rome doesn't exhibit any emotion when he goes through his retelling of this story. It's very like, yeah, and then at most he gets like a concerned line on his face, like, wasn't good, but there's no like. He doesn't act like a 15, 16-year-old kid would, I think, typically act if they just saw 8 of their friends murdered and just were shot in the head like 4 hours ago.
Was there any testimony given as to how many shots were fired?
Not that I'm aware of, maybe.
Okay.
Okay. And then, so that's the interview that night. And then, like, after the weekend, they come back, like, on Monday, and they have a few more interviews with him. And this time they're like standing outside the school. And there's a different reporter there. And his mom is with him now. And she's talking. And they're like going, like, behind me was where the school shooting happened. And like Rome was shot in the head. And miraculously, he pitched for his high school's baseball team on Saturday. So Rome was shot in the head. And then on Saturday, now first of all, what high school would have a mass shooting where 8 students died and 2 teachers, and then decide, yeah, but baseball tomorrow?
Yeah.
Everyone show up. I think most people would cancel the game.
Yeah.
Is this not? Like,
seems a little funny. Yeah.
Did anyone play volleyball the day after Columbine? Like the day after, in the gymnasium, in the same gymnasium where it happened. Was that a thing? I don't think it was a thing. And I don't think that, like, I just don't think they'd be having. But anyway, the claim is they had their baseball game as normal, and Rome was the pitcher, and he pitched the game. I don't know if he won or lost, but that was So the reporter brings this up, and he's like, "Yeah, I pitched." And then his mom is like, he's telling him about getting shot in the head, and his mom turns him around so he can see the back of his head, right? And she says, now, so she says, here's where the bullet entered and here's where it exits. So she's claiming there's an entry wound and an exit wound. Okay?
This whole time I thought maybe it grazed him or something.
That's what you think, right? You think, oh, maybe it was, but no. They're claiming, and he's pointing, and he's like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, she's pointing, and she's doing all this stuff. And she's saying, look, it came in here, and she points to imagine Rome is a clock, and his head is at 12 o'clock. All right? His face forward is at 12 o'clock.
Right.
She points to 6 o'clock.
Like on his forehead?
No, she points... Imagine his nose is 12.
Okay.
She points to 6 o'clock, the back of his skull.
Okay.
Like maybe halfway down. And she says, the bullet entered here. And she's pointing to his hair. Now, she's just pointing at hair. She moves the hair aside, but there's just more hair under it. He has a big head of hair.
Okay.
There's no obvious wound. No doctor has shaved away the area. No, she's just pointing at a head of hair. Like you can't even see skin. And she's like, the bullet entered here.
Where was the exit?
On the side of his neck at 9 o'clock. So the claim is a bullet. Now this is where it is not possible. A .38 caliber round. Like weird things happen in shootings. Mm-hmm. That anyone that's done ballistics knows that if you fire enough rounds, some of them fly in strange ways. You know?
True.
They end up in weird places. But it is not possible in the physical universe for a .38 caliber round, even having ricocheted a few times or whatever and lost momentum, to enter a person's body at 6 o'clock, impact something, and make a 90-degree angle turn, come out the other side of their body, and not mess things up inside a little bit.
Yeah.
Like if it's going to do that sort of a turn, it's going to impact off the skull, and it's going to break the skull, or at least bruise it. At least like there at least be like if he had turned around and he had a big, like a part of his skin had been ripped off and there was blood and he had he had bandage. Like okay, there's nothing. Literally, like if you turned around right now, listener, and said, "I've been shot in the back of the head," that's what it looks like. Zero. And then they point to this tiny. I mean, it looks like he had a bad pimple that sort of got infected on the side of his neck. He says, and this is where it came out.
Oh man.
And then I pitched baseball the next day. And everyone is just like, wow, that's miraculous. If it had been like 1/4 inch to the left or right, you'd be dead. And you're sitting there going, there's nothing wrong with him. What are you talking? Like nothing. And this is the thing. Okay. Like I said, it is not possible for a bullet to make a 90-degree turn off your head without it impacting something fairly hard. Mm-hmm. Like it just doesn't. That just doesn't happen. Things don't change momentum without imparting momentum. They don't change direction without imparting momentum. You know. And this guy has no signs of any sort of stress, PTSD, no like anything about having just witnessed everyone die. They briefly interview one other girl, and she's also not that upset. And they go, "Did this surprise you that this happened?" And she goes, "No, I always knew that it would. You know, it just seems like it happens everywhere, and it just seemed like a matter of time."
Oh, weird. No normal person would give that answer.
Exactly. It's not. So it is. I'm 100% convinced that at least that portion of it is fake. But here's where you get to this reality breakdown, because you're like, okay, how can that be? Because Santa Fe, Texas, is not a huge place, but it's not. People live there in some numbers. And presumably people know Rome Shoemaker. And he gets on the local news, and people go to this school. If it was 100% fake, then you run into this issue of okay, well, what did they do? Did they pay off everyone in the school to pretend? That seems unlikely. And
Like, it wouldn't work. Like, someone would blow the whistle.
Right.
And maybe they do, and they just don't. No one covers it, and so no one knows. I don't know. What about all the hospitals that supposedly took in patients? Did they really? Did they not? I don't. Maybe did they? Were they all told they went to a different hospital? Like, the one trauma center was like, "Oh, don't worry, they're all going to trauma center X," and trauma center X was told, "Don't worry, they're going to trauma center Y." But even in that case, doctors between facilities in a town know each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have that. So was it fakeness inserted into a real event, or was it realness inserted into a fake event? Like, did they plan it, a shooting? Did they have Rome character prepped and told what to say, and then someone walked in there and really did a shooting just to do it, like some paid actor? Or was it a real spontaneous event, and then they just got a kid and said, "Listen, you say this," and they just paid off one group or one family,
right?
Or so was it fake in the real or real in the fake? And then it's like, I don't know. It could be, but see, the problem is when you start really thinking about it, it's like, it doesn't seem like people would know he wasn't shot. Like, how did people, like, there's no, maybe he didn't even know he wasn't shot. Like, I thought about this, like, maybe they just had an actor at the scene and they found one guy and they said, "No, you've been," because he said, "I didn't even know I was shot." And he said, "You've been shot." And maybe that makes Rome thinks he's been shot. And they grab him, pull him over to an ambulance. They give him a little mark on his neck. And they said, "That was a close one. You were shot in the head." And then he goes on really thinking that's what happened.
Right. If you were to go, in there with a gun firing blanks and scare everybody, and then tell somebody they've been shot, and then grab them and put pressure on their wound or whatever, they're gonna believe. They will believe you. They'll probably even see blood that's not there.
Right. Or maybe they used a little blood. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're getting into La La Land here, but see,
the thing is, what they're claiming happened is not possible.
Yeah.
Like that, the bullet and leave no wound whatsoever besides like
that's not how gunshot wounds work.
It isn't. It's just not. And also, the two people they have are not emotional about it at all. One of them says a very canned response that seems not like something a normal high schooler would say. And so then you start to get into, you're like, well, how does this work? And you go back and forth, and you also get upset because you're like, why can't other people see that this isn't real? You start to get like this is obviously not true, and people are just like, man, like, no, like, that's not how bullets can't make 90-degree turns off your skull and have nothing happen to you. I'm not saying you die necessarily. You might live. You might recover 100%, but you're going to have a mark.
Yeah, you're not playing baseball the next day.
No, your head's going to hurt when you're giving your interview and you're turning your neck all around. If a 38 caliber just exited the side of your neck right beside your artery,
he would have been swollen up and bruised.
Yes, you would have at least had some sweat. You would have had something. But there's zero on this kid. And so you're like, well, that can't happen. And then you try to work through all the scenario. And then, so Matt made this video. He said, "This is a video I'm making." When he started, he said, "This is a video I'm making for people to show their normie friends who are close. Like, they're close to waking up. They're just on the edge." Because he said, if you give this to a normie, they're just going to make excuses. Say, well, weird things happen in, bullet fire. And, I mean, but are you claiming it's fake? How could it be fake, He said, so if you got someone that's close, maybe a spouse, maybe a good friend, and you're like, here, watch this. Just watch this. Because it's so obvious to anyone that's even remotely awake that this could not happen, right? And then as Matt's doing it, he said, but then I started feeling, I got that feeling, I'm being played a little bit here. Because this is a thing I've come back to before too. It's like the mistakes in the narrative are sometimes so obvious
that it's hard to think that they're not done on purpose. Like, because this is the thing, they could get better crisis actors.
Yep.
It's not that people are better actors than Rome Shoemaker was doing. If he may thought he really had been shot. Like I said, he may not. But that girl that was giving the canned response definitely, was. They could get better crisis actors. They could run better scripts. They could do a better makeup job. And be like, he was, this is how he was. They could do better, And so when you see these flaws in the narrative that are so glaring, like for instance, Biden's green screen where his hands are going through a microphone.
Right.
Just clearly going through, then you have to say, I could do better.
Yeah.
And I could do a better green screen job than that. And I don't have the infinite resources of the U.S. government. And then then you begin to think like, oh, well, they're incompetent. But you can't hold two things as one, that they're doing these huge psyops and they're also incompetent, right? You have to be somewhat competent to do giant global psyops. So you're left with this idea that it's on purpose. And then like, why is it on purpose? Or like the weird photos, like where they're like, oh yeah, this is a normal photo. There's nothing weird here at all. I know Jimmy Carter looks like a hobbit.
Yeah.
But he's always looked like a hobbit.
Right.
And they say it's just his angle. And it's like, no, that's not how pictures work.
No, that isn't.
Or the other one with Boris Johnson looked like he'd been inflated like a balloon.
I haven't seen that one.
That? Yeah,
no.
They're walking and Boris Johnson looks like 5 times his size. And they're like, oh, that's just perspective. Like, what? What are you talking about? So it's like that's on purpose. The holes in the narrative are on purpose. Why? And that's a good question. And there's a couple of possible answers. One is that if you get someone to disbelieve their own common sense and their senses, then you own them harder. Like if it's like,
oh man,
his hand. If you see his hand going through a microphone, and you say that's not green screen, and the people go, I guess it's not green screen, then they're done, right? Because now they can't believe their own eyes. And when someone can't believe their own eyes, you've got them completely brainwashed.
Yep.
They're gone. Or when they're like, Jimmy Carter was always a hobbit. And you go, yeah, Jimmy Carter. I mean, it's like 1984 when they go, we've always been at war with Eurasia or East Asia, whichever. I always want to say one of the. We've always been at war. And they're like, yeah, we've always been at war with them. Even though like 5 minutes before they weren't, right? Or like when they say now, like this is part of the rewriting history thing. They're like, America's always been an Islamic country. And you're like, yeah, it has. And they point to like one is like there was a Muslim here in 1737.
Yeah,
like one,
right.
One.
Yeah.
And then it's like, yeah. And so people just, when you get people to agree to obvious contradictions, right? Oh, and here's one for maybe you own them. And like this is coming from a Catholic person. I'm not disparaging. I just want you to think about it. Just think about it.
Okay.
This is gonna make my fellow Catholics mad. I'm not making any claims one way or the other. I'm just saying, think about it. Okay. This is because I was talking about this to a friend, and he said, "Yeah, like how Jesus says, don't call anyone father, and the Catholics contort themselves all over the place to justify calling people father." I said, that's a good point. And it's okay. Just relax. Don't get upset. Just think about it. You have to be willing to receive criticism and think, am I crazy? Am I trying this trap also? So when you see like something obvious happen in the narrative and they say, no, now say that it's the opposite. And then people do, It's like in that, I keep coming back to that Star Trek episode because I'm a Star Trek nerd, where the Romulans capture Picard, and his torture is he's physically tortured, and there are 4 lights, and he says he's asked how many lights there are, and he's supposed to say 3. Right? It's like if you say 3 lights, we'll stop the torture. But he keeps saying there are 4 lights. There are 4 lights because he doesn't want to let go of his reality under threat of pain. Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people have been so traumatized. And they're so like, it's like, just make the COVID stop. I'll agree with whatever. 70 million people have died from COVID.
Even though I don't know any of them.
Even though I don't know any, they're all, just make the trauma stop, So that's one theory as to why they make it so obvious. The other theory, which I think is actually more, when you think about it, has more validity to it, is that it's there on purpose for you to see that it's not real if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't have to, but it's like... well,
the people that are doing this have an interest in you knowing how powerful they are.
Well, it's that, but it's that, but it's also like... I think it may be a thing where, like, it's an out for people that don't want to fall into it.
Yeah, like on a higher level, yeah.
Like on a higher level, it's like, look, here's the, here was the, what was that one? The school shooting that was a big thing that Alex Jones got all attacked.
Sandy Hook, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, here's Sandy Hook, it was awful. Now here's the kids singing at the Super Bowl. Do you see? You don't have to be upset. They're okay. It didn't happen. If you're away, if you don't want to, because it's a seductive thing. It's like come into the trauma, get the emotion, it's like, but if you don't want to, here's the easy, and it's plain to see. If you're just not given over to the trauma, you're gonna see it. If you're awake at all, you're gonna see that it didn't. Or like, here's the Columbia disaster. Now here's a guy that looks just like that person with the same name giving a lecture at Samford.
Yeah.
He looks just like him. He's the same age and he has the same name. And here he is. And you're like, oh, okay. But see, and it's like they were burning down the Jews, and a guy that did it's called Israel Burns. Wink, wink. And so it's
my
like
favorite.
they're trying to. It's almost like they're giving you an out, because it's like if you don't want to get wrapped up in it, then you don't have to. But then you get into this, and this is what Matt ultimately talked about. He said, and I thought in trying to explain it, he said, "Am I also?" Because. So this episode is going to be a little what they call syncretic, where we take in different religions, right? And just it's fine, because my theory has always been you take in the things that make sense, and then you trust that you'll find it in your own tradition eventually. Like if it's true, it's true, right? And so Matt was like, I feel like this is a little bit like what the Buddhists talk about, getting trapped in the wheel of samsara, like the wheel of cause and effect. He said, because the desire, he said, maybe the desire itself to wake people up, quote unquote, to like these obvious things, is another level of being trapped. Because you get into this thing where like you feel morally superior, or you feel smarter, or you feel like, why don't they see it? And then,
or you feel hopeless because you can't get anybody to believe you. Yeah.
And so when you see these obvious things, and then you feel hopeless that other people don't see it, he says, is that part of the trap? And he says, maybe the guy that wins, or the gal that wins, like when you get up to the pearly gates and they just waltz on through and they didn't have any sins to talk about or anything, maybe that, like, what happened? And you ask, like, how did they get through? And they said, well, they recognized the silliness, and they just said it didn't matter. They didn't feel the need to, like, And so I think this is there does need to be those of us who do these deep dives into things and figure out, hey, look, guys, there's some problems here. This isn't quite real. But I think if you get locked into the spinning, like, how can it happen? Like, how can Rome be shot but not, and it's not, and he doesn't know, and like, if once you identify the nonsense, for most people, the rule should be walk away.
Yeah,
like it doesn't make sense anymore. There's this narrative fell apart. I don't know. However, no one saw that Biden's hand goes through a green screen. I don't know why people don't understand that Jimmy Carter's not a midget. But I don't, or for that matter, I don't know why they don't see that Trump's head was wobbling like a jib jab character.
Yeah,
at the January.
Who has this figured out? The thing you're pointing out, I think a lot of people have it figured out, but they don't talk about it for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
that make it consistent. But old people,
yeah,
old people know what's up, because if you go to somebody who's in their like late 70s, early 80s, and you start asking them about certain things, they at first they will demur. Yeah. But if you really want to know what they think, a lot of times they'll say, "Okay, kid, listen, that's fake. I don't believe any of this." Some of the hardest core like COVID truthers I know are like little old ladies that wear pearls. Okay?
Yeah.
And they're not even gonna, they don't even talk about it. They don't even talk about it. Only when you get up in a conversation, which, talk to little old ladies, by the way. It's great for them and you. Okay? Just,
yeah.
They're awesome. But anyway, when you get them to open up about it, they'll tell you what's up, and they know what's up. They know it's fake. Just saying.
And they do. It's like they, because I think they probably went through a phase like we did where you feel like you have to. It's like you come out of the Matrix and you're like trying to wake people up in their pods, and they don't want to wake up. Yeah. It's just like in the movie where he was like, you could tell people, and they will fight to the death to defend the illusion.
Yeah.
And so it's fine to plumb the depths of these illusions and try to figure out what's going on, but also don't get attached to it and don't feel like, because some people need the illusion still.
And don't make it the purpose of your life to get everybody to believe what you've discovered, because it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
You'll make yourself miserable. This is something I had to deal with personally. Is just to give up on the idea that I was going to be able to convince family members, friends, to see the things that I see so clearly when the pressure of the world is so heavy upon them. And that's just something, you can't do it. And you got to be okay that you're the only person that thinks the way you think in your circle. And then just be okay with it.
It's like Matt said, that's just your burden to carry. It's your cross to bear. Yeah. It's
not, and when you let go of it, it's not really that heavy. Like, it's okay that you're the only person that thinks COVID is fake. Or whatever.
It's okay. But see, I think a lot of people have trouble making that step because it's difficult to deal with reality breakdown. And you're like, it is something much stranger is going on when you begin to look at how all this is possible and why, and something bordering on magical is happening. And it's like how reality works, and it's being written and rewritten in real time and going back and forth. And it's something bordering on extremely strange. And then you're like, I don't know how reality works. And then you begin to, that can be a spiral, right? This is why in Matt's view, the guy that just walked through the gates was like, and I don't need to know.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's why
we should expect not to know how reality works. I mean, who do we think we are?
Well, yeah, that's like Terrence McKenna used to say. Where is it written that intelligent monkeys can figure out the cosmos? If we saw a sea slug saying that it had figured out life, the universe, and everything, we might think it was presumptuous.
On the one hand, that's like a Reddit scientist take, but on the other hand, I see his point.
Yeah. Well, that was where Terrence was great, is that he could bridge Reddit science points and like, yeah, but also,
right.
Good point. Okay, but so going from Terrence to the other great, what would you call him, American guru of the same period, Alan Watts, the Alan Watts Show. Are you familiar with Mr. Watts?
I've heard some of Akira the Don's like.
Yeah, he has
meaning wave mixes, and that's about my experience with him.
Well, Alan Watts' big thing is he had a great voice.
Yeah, he did.
His voice was awesome. It was so good and soothing, and like for recording, he couldn't help but be listened to, and he could be talking about anything, and people would be like, "Yeah, let's keep talking." He had a great voice. But I thought Alan Watts fit into this show today, and this because we're going to talk, because we got into this a little bit like, why are they doing it? What's going on? And I'm going to talk about some of Alan Watts' philosophy, but he had a lot of philosophy. But specifically, we're focused in on problems of duality and the nature of God.
Okay.
And duality is sort of this principle in like Taoism, but it crops up in every religion. Christianity is actually a duality religion too, but people don't want to. You have to be ready for that. And I think our listeners are ready for that. We're going to go into that. And I'm not making this up. This is something that church fathers used to talk about way back in the day. But we're going to go into that. But Alan Watts was a hippies era spiritual guru. Mm-hmm. A bit like, I think he was more successful than I think Ram Dass, as far as like having people listen to it. But in that same vein, people, the boomers coming of age, going into their 20s and 30s, were really into like Eastern spirituality and psychedelics and exploring their own consciousness. And one of the people that rose to the fore as like a voice was Alan Watts. Even though he was older than the boomers, he would have been like a fatherly figure to them.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was an interesting character. He was a British man. Grew up going to private schools in England, but he came to America and lived a lot of his life in California. He was in that sort of prime boomer California, summer of love revolution time. And he was an Anglican minister for a while, and then I think he became ordained as maybe a it's not really ordination, but whatever they call it, as a Taoist like priest of some kind.
Okay.
And he also Zen Buddhism, like he studied in a real way, not in like an internet way, but in he went to various schools and studied several different religions. And he saw himself as a bridge person that would bridge East and West. He's like, okay, you guys are interested in this. I am schooled in Christianity and this, and I'm going to help you see where they connect, if at all they do. And we're going to talk about it. And he was an interesting guy. He lived his philosophy. One of his philosophies was like, we should be like the animals and not worry so much. Because, he talked about, moths fly and they don't worry that they fly into the flames. Because they're just going about their day. And if they get confused that a candle is a flickering and thinks that it's a mating sign of another moth and fly into it, that's okay. Because they flew into it and didn't worry about it. They lived their whole life and not, without care. And so likewise, he lived his life with a high degree of uncaring and drank himself to death at 53, maybe. He enjoyed his alcohol. He enjoyed it. It was sad, but I don't think he thought it was sad. He just was like, I'm enjoying this, and if I drink a little too much and die in my sleep, whatever. He said that's just how it'll go. And so you can view that how you want. He was not a perfect man by any means. A bit of a womanizer, had several different wives. But who cast the first stone? Who among us is perfect? But nonetheless, despite all of his, and he would tell people, he said, listen, if you see me as like a as like a sage, he said, I just laugh. He said, because I know what I am. He said, I'm a bit of a scoundrelly fellow. And he would say that, explicitly. He said, I'm a bit of a scoundrelly fellow. But nonetheless, his ideas were very interesting. And some of them are, I think, true. And some of them are very helpful. So, like Thomas Aquinas said, whoever says the truth is speaking from the Holy Spirit, no matter who they are. So, the problem of duality. So, what about duality? Is this thing where the world appears to be, as Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, said, all things come into being through the union of opposites. So you have night and day, you have hot and cold, you have light and dark, you have male and female, hard and soft. Everything is known by its opposite, right? And the union of opposites is how things come together. So like in biblical language, it would be the union of heaven and earth. In sexual language, the union of male and female, which creates new life. And so these two poles, like two poles of a magnet, you can't have a magnet with one pole. If you cut a magnet in half, you get two magnets with two poles. They each have north and south.
Right.
It's impossible to have a magnet with one pole. Although actually, I was in school, one of my physics professors, who was a high level E&M guy, electricity and magnetism, he said, well, actually, you can prove that there might be a monopole in the universe, but if there is, there's only one. And he never explained that to me, so I don't know if that's true at all. But he had claimed, just in an offhand way, that he had once calculated that there might exist a monopole, but it would just be one.
Okay.
If it was possible. I don't know. This is an aside. But anyway,
the caveat there.
In normal experience, you cannot have just one pole of a magnet, just like you can't have a thing with it all insides and no outsides. Insides imply outsides, fronts imply backs, right?
Yep.
And so we have a world in which things appear dual. They come in pairs. And mysticism, largely, is seeing the unification. This is the mystical American patriotism. Mysticism is largely exists in seeing the union of apparent opposites. So you have the two, but they're secretly one, right? And they go like left and right politics, but they're secretly one, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people have been woken up to that, how the parties act as a unison, even though they appear to be fighting.
Yep.
And so a chessboard is a really good symbol for reality that Alan Watts would use sometimes. So like on one side you have white. These are the angels. This is God, the heavenly legions, the armies of heaven. This is goodness. On the other side of the chessboard you have black. The devil, evil, legions of hell, social justice warriors, all that sort of stuff. And then the two sides wage a war over the realm of existence, which is the board, which is claimed in equal parts by both sides, right? It's a chessboard being, of course, half black and half white. And they're all mixed up and intermingled so that no one really knows where the light ends and the darkness begins. It's like, well, it's light right here, but if you take a step now, it's dark, and then it's light again. And that's sort of how it is with the world. I guess Jesus said in his parable, the world is like unto a field in which an owner planted good seed. But at night, when everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed bad seed. He sowed weeds in the field. And lo and behold, when the plants came up, there was both wheat and tares tangled up with one another to such a degree that you could not uproot one without uprooting the other. And the angels came to God and asked if they should go and weed the garden. But God said no, for precisely the reason that in doing so, in pulling up the bad plants, you might pull up the good as well. And this is the situation we find ourselves in a world where, in a world where everything is so mingled up that oftentimes all choices appear neither white nor black but gray. Everything seems like, it's like, yeah, that's good, but, or yeah, that's bad, but, and then sometimes you say like, well, the bad, this good action only exists because, like when you start examining things, like the interconnections between the good and the bad seem to be inseparable. And this is a problem. It's a moral philosophy problem. It's a problem for like how we view theology and God and all this stuff. And good people, or at least those who consider themselves good, like who consider themselves on the side of righteousness, whether or not they are is a different question, but they always see the parable as only in terms of the weeds choking the wheat. But you have to remember, of course, from the other side, in the duality, from the point of view of the weeds, the wheat is choking them out. Because they're both fighting for the same soil and sunshine. And this becomes a problem. So the Taoists resolve this by saying, well, the world is equal parts light and dark. It's equal parts sun and moon. It's equal parts chaos and order. And these two things together are necessary for reality to exist. One depends upon the other. You have, like Alan Watts used to say, you cannot know what order was unless you have chaos. Or in his words, messes. He always used the word messes. And so if you take a tapestry, right? And you look at here it is, this ordered and beautiful object, it's got a nice picture on it. And it's like, that's great. And if you zoom in to the threads, at that level, no one did anything about any of it. There's no organization at all. It's just a tangled mass of whatever, right? No, it's just a mess. You zoom in a little bit more, you get down to the molecular level of the fibers, and all of a sudden it's perfect order again. It's like these little bitty microfibers that have been stretched, and they're all together, and they're wound to make an individual fiber. Zoom in a little more, chaos again, right? A giant mess. It's like these atoms just whipping around doing that. No one zoom in a little more, and it's like on whatever as you zoom in and out of magnification, you go from order to mess, back and forth, and you don't know what one is. So they appear to depend upon one another, and you wouldn't know what order was unless you had messes, and you wouldn't know what messes were unless you had the concept of order. And this. So when you go back to this idea of like the wheat and the field, because we say like, okay, surely though God, like the answer God gives the angels is perplexing. Like, don't pull up the weeds. Don't, because we weed our gardens, right? And you say, because you sort of think like, okay, yeah, but surely God, it would not be better in the long run to just bite the bullet, uproot the weeds now, and yes, maybe there's some collateral damage in the moment, but surely in the long run, that's better than just allowing evil to continue to grow alongside everybody. It sounds a bit like a surgeon unwilling to do an operation on a cancer patient because he fears he might hurt non-cancerous tissue. And okay. you're like, yeah, but you should do it. And so you're like, why don't you? If you don't, it's going to be a lot worse. If you just let the weeds continue to grow, it's going to be so much worse. And then you take a step back, further back, and you say, okay, but in the parable, the owner of this field can be excused because he's mortal. He can't plan for everything. Everybody's got to sleep. But God doesn't have to sleep, and he's not mortal. And furthermore, he's all the omnis. He's omnipotent. He's omnipresent. He's omniscient. How can anyone sneak into God's garden, into God's creation, and sow evil without getting caught? And that's just it. It's a bit like we're talking about, like, how can they do these fake things without getting caught? That's the thing. Like, you're forced to conclude, if you really think it out, that if God is indeed all the omnis, that in some way, that it's simply not possible evil snuck into the garden without God's knowledge that it was going to happen. Of course he knew. He had to have known. And he had to have, in some sense, allowed it. And furthermore, Satan, being an angel, and being not only that, but an archangel, an eternal creature of vastly more intellect than you or I, must have known that God knew he was coming, and took the lack of defense against it as implicit permission to do so. And you begin to think like, it's something, and don't worry, I'm going to tie this all about where it feels fine. I know people are like, this is getting weird. Don't worry. I'm going to it's all going to be okay at the end. He's not And so Satan is in a sense not wrong. Like, after all, do we not read of this exact scenario in Job? Right? In the court of it, after the fall, Satan is still somehow in the courts of heaven doing bidding on God's behalf. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? And Satan answered, From going to and from on the earth, and from walking up and down on it. And then, so he's like, Where have you been? I've been looking over the earth. And I noticed something. I noticed Job. God says, God, he doesn't even bring it up. God says to Satan, he says, Have you considered Job? Isn't he good? And then something really remarkable happens. Like C.S. Lewis talked about, he says, God and Satan enter into only what can be described as a wager, like a bet. And so Satan's like, Look here, Father Almighty. You've got a fine servant in Job. But you know surely that he only loves you because you've blessed him so much. Let me throw some curses on him, and we'll see how big of a fan of yours he is then. And God says, I think he'll still be my faithful servant. You've got a deal. Go ahead, you can do this and this, but lay off that and that. You know? So he sets some bounds about how much Satan can do, and then Satan goes and does his thing. So it's God is saying to the man that sneaks into the garden, go ahead, but you can only plant these sorts of seeds for right now, at least in this man's life. And it's a very troubling and embarrassing passage for modern people. It's a very difficult passage. And they come up with all sorts of weird rationales to explain it, or really to explain it away. Like, one of the most common being, like, well, we simply can't understand it. You know, this story is given to us to show that God's ways are simply too far beyond our own. And after all, they say, this isn't how the book of Job resolves. God comes to Job at the end and says, when Job is complaining and going, what's all this about? I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you telling Satan to come attack me? And by the way, I didn't fall for his traps. And you should have known that. Of course you know that I wouldn't. Why did you need to make a bet? You already knew the answer. Why did I have to suffer through this? And so people say, well, God's ways are simply higher than ours. We can't understand them. And that's what he tells Job, they say. You know, after all, at the end of the book, he says, the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm and said, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man, and I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together, and all the angels shouted for joy. Right? Like, where were you? What do you know? Who are you to complain? It doesn't make sense to you, but what do you know? And God goes on. He talks for a little while, and he says, the wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, though they cannot compare with the wings and the feathers of the stork. The ostrich lays her eggs on the ground and lets them warm in the sand, unmindful that a foot may crush them, that some wild animal may trample them. She treats her young harshly, as if they were not hers. She cares not that her labor was in vain. For God did not endow her with wisdom or give her a share of good sense. Yet when she spreads her feathers to run, she laughs at horse and rider. Did you give the horse its strength, or clothe its neck with a flowing mane? Do you make it leap like a locust, striking terror with its proud snorting? It paws fiercely, rejoicing in its strength, and charges into the fray. It laughs at fear, afraid of nothing, does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles at its side, along with the flashing spear and lance. In frenzied excitement, it eats up the ground. It cannot stand still when the trumpet sounds. Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom and spread its wings to the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? It dwells on a cliff and stays there at night, a rocky crag and a stronghold. Its young ones feast on blood, and where the slain are, there it is. And so God's going through and he's saying, well, what do you know about creation? What do you know? And so you think about that for a minute, and people are like, yeah, what do you know? And that's the standard answer that most people will have to that today. But Chesterton, as Alan Watts pointed out, Chesterton, one of my favorite authors,
mm-hmm.
had the exact opposite take. Whereas most people go, you see, God is telling Job, you can't fathom the world, so don't question it. Chesterton says the opposite. He sees God as saying, you think you've got problems. Look at this crazy world I've made. It's a mess. There are birds laying their eggs on the ground too stupid to know they might get stepped on. The eagles have to eat rotting flesh, and horses get bloodlust at the sound of trumpets. Do I not make rain come on the places where nothing grows? What am I doing? This place is a madhouse, and you're looking for order in it. When did I ever say you could expect that? Right? He said, when was it ever said that you could expect things to just go? Like, look around you. The world is a little bit crazy. And I always like that take on it, because he's like, God's saying, why would I make the ostrich to just lay its eggs on the ground and then step on them herself? What am I doing? That sort of idea. And that strikes some people as being irreverent. But that's sort of what God is getting at in this passage, because he starts off with that thing, and then he starts talking about things that are increasingly weird. And then you're like, yeah, but that is what is that about? Especially when it gets to the place of like, look, don't I send rain on places where it's needed, and also equally on places where it's totally wasted? And then, so blessings fall, and I bless the righteous and the unrighteous alike. And it's just like the rain coming through at sort of random. And people really are like, that's troubling. Like, this is... and you see why Job can be so disconcerting for people. But if you listen to it, I think it's telling us a deep truth, a truth that Alan Watts was always trying to impress upon people, which is that whenever you see two opposites, two supposedly different things, always existing together, that's a sign that they're secretly one. It's called the universe. It's one verse. It's one song. And like I was talking about the threads on the tapestry, if you zoom in and out, you get order and messes going together, and that's the whole world. Like, on one level, yeast is just eating and producing gaseous excrement, like farts. Mm-hmm. On another level, it's making champagne. And that's like your life and my life and society and the world. And the parts you love about history couldn't have arisen without the parts you hated. It just that it all goes. Indeed, one is often a direct reaction to the other. And so this moment in time that you live in now is the seed for some future moment in time, which will be glorious and good, even if you don't like right now. And this moment in time now was caused by the moments that came before it, many of which people look back on fondly. And people say this when they say things like, do we not say that God brings good out of evil? As Joseph said to his brothers who sold him into slavery, look, I was sold into slavery. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. He goes into as a slave. He comes out as the ruler of Egypt, and then his descendants go back into being slaves, and then they plunder Egypt again. It's like a back and forth. It's a round and round. It's going, and so it's this light and dark alternating, like two poles of a battery. And one of the things we're experiencing right now is that prior to World War II, the battery of society was flipped toward the masculine. And it was very hyper-aggressive. And it had a lot of big wars. It had Napoleonic Wars, Revolutionary Wars, it had Civil War, it had World War I, World War II. And then World War II just exhausted that side of the polarity, and then it clicked over to the feminine side. And now things are hyper-emotional, they're more passive-aggressive, they're more verbal, there's a lot more like chicanery rather than outright conflict. And after a while, that will be exhausted and flip back over. Because that's how the world works. And that's why we're told to love your enemies, because your enemies are very important. Like this podcast would not exist if the world hadn't gone insane, and the little community we've built together would not exist if the world was not crazy. and we weren't trying to understand it. Like, people in our sphere, and likewise, by the opposite token, people in our sphere give leftists something to be mad about and unify over. Like, we cause their communities to grow. We're in a symbiotic relationship with them. That's why they love Donald Trump so much. I mean, they love to hate him. You know, they talked about him all the time. They talked about him way more than anyone that was his fans. The people that hated Donald Trump spoke his name 7 times for every person that was a MAGA person. You know, day in and day out, Trump. It's like the old story Watch used to tell. One day in the court of heaven, an angel asked God Almighty, he said, Father, who will get to heaven first, the man that loves you or the man that hates you? And God thought for a minute, and he said, the man that hates me. He'll think about me more often. And there's truth in that. Like, it reveals something about what's going on. The people hated Donald Trump so much because he was a breath of fresh air to their existence. Right? He revived them. He gave them life again. Because in 2015, the left wing had become so dominant, it was almost unopposed. And anything unopposed collapses. You need your opposite. Like, it's only when we backed off fighting the Cold War in any meaningful sense that the USSR collapsed. As long as it had a good enemy to fight, it could stay forever. And the U.S., having lost its enemy in the USSR, is now doing its collapse because it keeps trying to. That's why we need. This is why we spent all of our energy trying to find a new big baddie. Like, for a while, it was the Islamic extremists. Like, that's the terrorists and and if we have to fund them, if we have to create them ourselves with our own money, we will, because that's what we need to live. And that's what they did. And that, you know, that held together for a while, but they weren't that good at it. They didn't do enough terrorism. We really wanted them to do more. We kept sitting here going, it's terror level orange today. Everyone look around. Anybody see any bombs? Suspicious bags? Anybody? And everyone was just dying for something, and they did so little of it. And they had to go to mosque and like poke them with sticks and say, come on, don't you want to do an extremism? Come on. Do an extremism. And every now and then they get one and they go crazy and they just like, yeah, that's great. And now the right wing can say now that we need to like crack down on the Muslims, and the left wing can get all fired up and be like, no, that's civil liberties. But if no one did that, it couldn't. What would happen? There would be nothing to go with. There would be no fuel for the fire. And so that didn't work. And so that played out. And so then they're like, okay, Russia's the big baddie, right? And Putin is not playing along. Go attack more. You just took over Crimea. Just do a little more. Just do it. Do the election thing. Mess it up. He's not doing enough. He just bought some Facebook ads. Just not giving us enough. So like, okay, not that. Maybe China. Maybe it's China. Or we'll have domestic terrorism now. Maybe just come on, go kill some black people. Go do it. We really need, and they're like desperate for it to happen. Because you need something to brace yourself. You can't stand without the ground. You need something solid. You can't lean against a wall if the wall doesn't push back. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If there's nothing to push against, you can't exist. Right? And that's why it doesn't work being at war with an emotion. Like, we're right at this point, America's collapsing because all we have to fight about is hate. We're against hate. Like, hate's not, you need someone that you can't shoot hate. You can't engage in economic
or terror
warfare with hate.
You can't shoot terror.
Yeah, or terror. It doesn't, so you need something more solid. This is the problem of all monopolar worlds. This is the problem the Roman Empire faced, why it constantly had to have barbarians at the gates and let the barbarians come in a bit. It can never push them, because you have to have a problem to justify your own existence. That's why North Korea only exists so long as they're South Korea. If the South ever just said, yeah, whatever, we're going to join you, it looks better, North Korea would go away. It would collapse, because all the rhetoric that justifies the existence of North Korea is in South Korea and the U.S. backing it and constantly trying to take over at any minute. Like, that's the whole reason for its existence. If it stopped, they would go away. So North Korea needs South Korea, just like the internally in America is held together by a little tension between the Northerners and the Southerners. It's always there, and it's just like, yeah, meh, and then they go, meh. The rednecks, they go, meh, meh.
It's true. I say meh all the time.
Yeah, and that's how the country sort of holds together in a way. And so we're all like watching this chess game, and we've all chosen sides, white or black, and to keep the game going, we all pretend to get really, really emotionally invested in this game, as though white or black might finally be victorious over the other once and for all. Like, oh no, black might win. This is it. Did you see the news? Did you hear about how terrible it is? There's no coming back from this. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Yes, the last one was also the most important of our lifetime. And yes, the one before that. We have to fight. It's a new Hitler. And or we'll be plunged into communism forever. We have to fight. If we don't, it's over. It's over. You know? And the other side says the same thing all the time. And the secret, the real like lowdown on the world, is that if anyone ever actually does get a checkmate, they just reset the board and play again. And that's the whole of history. And is it a surprise that this happens? This is how we experience reality in countless other realms. Like every year, people get super intensely involved, life-alteringly involved in the Super Bowl, or every year in the 4 years in the Olympics, massively into it as though the cosmos depends on it. And then 5 minutes after it's over, they start talking about next year's game.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's so important. And like, next year. It's a show, right? It's a play. The refrain from this program is that everything is fake. And that's because on a deep level, it is, see. It's this duality is a necessity. All, like Heraclitus said, that's what he was talking about. All things come into being by the union of opposites. You can't lean against a chair unless it pushes back. You know, every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. Like Alan Watts liked to say, like I talked about a lot in one show, the warp and the woof. The threads hold each other up in a shirt. It's like or the Mitch Hedberg joke. My belt holds up my pants, but my belt loop holds on my belt. Who's the real hero here? Right? It's because they hold each other up. And that's how the world works. It's two opposites, and they hold one another up. And that is, in this duality thinking to modern Christianity, largely after the Renaissance, is strange. But before that, it was not. In fact, some of the church fathers spoke about it sort of explicitly. Aside. So the Abrahamic worldview is largely the world as an artifact. It's something made, right? And that's true, and there's value in it. But there's also other ways of looking at it. The Taoist worldview is that the universe is an organism. It's one vast living thing with many parts. The Hindu-Buddhist conception, by contrast, is the world is a drama. In fact, in the Hindu worldview, the world is essentially, the cosmos is essentially a stage play put on by God for God's own amusement. And that sort of like for God's own like what's the purpose of it? It's like it's a play, it's a game being played out. Why people get hung up on the why, and especially Western people. And the answer that the Hindu would give you, like one of my friends, he was saying that when he went to a Hindu temple and he was looking for we're taught to like look for metaphors and meaning and stuff. And so he was sitting there looking at a statue of Krishna, and Krishna's playing a flute, and he's thinking, what is the meaning? Like, why would they give Krishna a flute? It has 5 holes on the flute. Maybe that's like the 5 senses or something. Like, and he's playing, and that's how we view it. And he's thinking there real deeply for like, a half hour while he's waiting for the service to end. And then it finishes, and the guy that's running the service, I don't know what they call their priest, I guess, or whatever. He says, I'll ask him. He says, why does Krishna play the flute? What is it? He said, I think it actually said, what does the flute mean, or something like that. So why does Krishna play the flute? And the guy just looked at him and said, because he likes it. And so Western people are always in this habit of looking for like some like really deep structural metaphorical thing, but the answer to the universe may be like, why did God make the universe? Because he likes it, because it's fun, because as he said in Genesis, it's good. Isn't that good? Look at that. This is fun. And my point to you as a Christian is that these other worldviews, organism and drama, are not so alien to our own tradition as you might suppose. Like Job itself, the book, is most likely a play in the vein of a Greek tragedy. Like it probably is not, because it has 3 acts. There's like the beginning act where it lays out the plot. It tells you the behind the scenes. It's like, now look behind the curtain. Here's up in heaven. We have God. Here's what's happening in the realm of the divine and why it's happening. And then you go down and it shows Job. And then there's the catastrophes happen in convenient order. Like some guy always runs in and is like, and I'm the last. I'm the only one that remains to tell you. And then right afterwards, another one's, your building collapsed and your children died. And I'm the only one that remains to tell you. And your fields were burned. And I'm the only. And then there's a big conversation piece, like the philosophical bit. And then there's the Deus Ex Machina at the end, where God comes and he's like, yeah, and here's why I did it. Like it's just like a Greek. It's like a Greek play, really. It's the same sort of vein. But when you talk about like God doing things, people don't like it because it makes it sound trivial. Like we talk about the world, why does Krishna play the flute? Because he likes it. It makes it sound trivial. Like God is just whittling at a piece of wood for no real purpose. But amusement, like play, is another thing Alan Watts would say. Play has the dual meaning. It can mean something trivial, like, it's just for play. Or it can mean something like when you play the piano. Or when you go see a play, like you go see Hamlet, what you're doing is it's not serious, really. I mean, I guess it can be, but it is very sincere. Hamlet is not trivial, even though it is a play. And playing a concert piano is not trivial, even though it is play.
Beauty is a good end in and of itself.
Exactly. Beauty is a good end in and of itself. And so is fun, and so is amusement. And so people get upset about the idea that maybe God's just doing it for fun. Or as Alan Watts would say, God is just doing it for a gas in the 60s music. But that's pretty interesting because the Holy Spirit is, and gas is not, those aren't weird. That's a very close relation because spirit just was sort of like air, like, to breathe in, to be inspired is to breathe in, and to expire, to die is to breathe out because you lose your breath, the spirit. And so it is with God and creation, the music of the spheres and so on. Why does Krishna play the flute? Because he likes it. And if you're looking for anything more deep than that, you may be missing the point. And so that's where we get to Alan Watts' famous quote, "Man suffers only because he takes seriously what God meant for fun." Which is an interesting way to look at it. Or, as Christ put it, perhaps, what is this generation like? To what shall I compare it? We played the flute for you and you did not dance. We sang a dirge and you did not mourn. And so God's like, well, what do you want? Get involved. You want to be sad? Be sad. You want to jump around? Jump around. But just get involved. And they won't even do it. Like you're sort of dead. Just move, And this is the thing. But see, this is I guess this is where discipleship comes in. Right? This is okay, I'm gonna bring it back to Mushroom Soy Jack. You familiar?
Oh boy. Yeah.
Mushroom Soy Jack. So he's been making the rounds. There's Wojak, the character who's is he now the most famous meme ever?
Wojak's pretty popular, yeah.
Very popular. The white-faced guy that's the NPC meme and every other meme.
He's always upset about something.
He's always upset about something. He's now turned into a mushroom. How would you describe this mushroom?
Like this pleasantly calm face with a big mushroom cap head.
I love it. It's weird. It's just like looking at you like, hello, I'm a mushroom. I think it's because it's like you sent me a text, which I forgot to respond to. You were like wondering, is this connected to psychedelic mushroom use, and like are they being controlled by the spores of the mushroom? You know, and I think maybe but see, this is because people you say like, well, why does, if the world is just for fun, if it's that true, like then why is this all this discipleship? Like what about all this like holiness and like the fasting and the doing, like what's all that about then? If it's just like God is just playing a big game for fun, well, what would that be? That seems very serious, you know? Why bother with something so serious if God is like playing music? If the chessboard's just going to be reset after the match, then why worry with all that stuff? To quote Paul, what's the good in it? Much in every way, right? So mushroom soy jack is making the rounds because psychedelics are big now, bigger than perhaps they were in the '60s when Alan Watts was around.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with psychedelics is they can alter a person's perception in such a way as to temporarily see past the duality of the world as presented to the real truth that underneath it all is all one. And under the influence of like mushrooms or LSD or something like that, they might well look at an old ashtray and see the beatific vision. You really might. But the thing is, this is always the problem with hippies, is they come down from their high and they claim some great spiritual insight, but then they're unable to really do anything with it. Like as proof, you go like, what did you learn on your spirit journey? Tell me, psychonaut. What's the meaning of life? And then they sort of look around from their days and they hold up an ashtray and they go, here it is. And it's underwhelming. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is why potheads, this is why interiorly they're feeling like they're having this tremendous experience. And then you ask them like, okay, now tell me about it. And you just sound like losers.
Yeah.
Man, it's just, everything was just, I looked in the grilled cheese and I saw everything. And you're like, what? Because everyone knows that if you go to the fairy realm and slay the dragon, you have to bring back some treasure. Otherwise, no one knows if you're telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And people on a spirit journey, they can't bring anything back because they don't have any discipline, which is the root of discipleship. That's what it means. And people get upset about discipline now because that invokes images of like punishment and like a nun hitting you with a ruler or whatever. But that's not really the older meaning. The older meaning is more like skill. Like a skill. That's like the historical context. Like you become a disciple of a master to learn the master's skill. So Michelangelo had disciples. Da Vinci had disciples. And yes, he may have hit them with a ruler or a paintbrush, I don't know, but he did so that they would learn to paint. And when they messed up, he'd be like, whack! I've told you 1,000 times, don't do it like that. Do it like this. Here's how you mix the paints. Here's how you get that contrast. Bam. And so even today in academia, the small portions of it worth saving, people define themselves by who their graduating professor was. Like who they studied under. They become disciples of a master in archaeology or Chinese literature or something. And so in the same way, Buddha had disciples, Jesus had disciples. For the same reason, they were people seeking to replicate in themselves the skills and lifestyle of their master. So in our case, our society has few to any, maybe none, unbroken spiritual traditions. The modernists have sought and largely succeeded to smash them everywhere. Even in the church, where they've destroyed liturgy and they destroyed like connection to the past and then this and that. And they always, every 10 years, you have to reinvent everything. We have to not even the groups you think would be largely immune to it, like Mennonites, are they're under this constant pressure. Like, is this really relevant today? Shouldn't we up it? Shouldn't we, shouldn't we make it hip? And so people go on these spirit journeys, but they don't have any skills, guides. They don't know anyone who can translate their insights to others or their friends. And as Paul would say, as Paul did say, look, speaking in tongues is a gift, but don't do it if you don't have an interpreter, because you're just going to cause a mess. If you're able to tap into the divine, great. But don't do it around other people unless you have someone to interpret it, because you're just going to make things worse. And that's sort of like the people that go on. I mean, it's not sort of like, it's the same as the people that go on these things and they're trying to like build a lifestyle around it, but they have no one with skill to bring it to the real world, like to connect it. They go up into heaven, they fly up and they do their psychonaut stuff, or they do their intense meditation retreat, and they have some insight that's genuine and good, but then they can't draw it down into the real world. Like I have a friend named, I'll call him Matt. His name's not Matt. I'll call him Matt. And he's a proper hippie. You know, he's done mushrooms and LSD, and he used to go to Grateful Dead concerts and sell grilled cheeses as his main form of income. And he would sleep in bathtubs and stuff like that. You know, like a real getting dirty hippie. You know?
Yeah.
And if you ask, and he would go on, and I'm forced to conclude by his demeanor that he has had experiences from his psycho trips that have been profound. You know, like he's more at peace than a lot of people, more loving than a lot of people. And yet, if you ask him about it, he can't tell you anything. He just repeats hippie jargon. He's like, man, it was far out. Far out. It's like, well, okay, but that's you haven't brought back any treasure from the dragon you slayed, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because Matt is a psychonaut, but he's also lazy. He doesn't have any skills whatsoever, you know? And so, but what if instead these people, or Matt, were discipleshiped, they've been disciplined, disciple-led into, say, painting? What if he could take his vision that he'd seen of the dirty ashtray, and he could paint it in such a way that inside of it you could see like what he saw in that ecstatic vision? That would be something. Then we'd have something. Or if he could write it into beautiful poetry or prose, or even like making it into architecture, or use that to influence even his. It doesn't have to be something artistic, just some sort of skill that you have. Like it could be an athletic skill. Like Alex Honnold, the guy that free climbed El Capitan, people were captivated by that because it shows you something about the human spirit. You know, to be able to do a feat like that. So whatever your skill is, you just need to have one. And it doesn't have to be artsy. It just needs to be something that you are skilled in and you can express yourself through. Because, see, the ashtray example again, people can see God in an ashtray in a certain frame of mind. Maybe induced by chemicals, maybe not, right? But you look down at the ashtray and all of a sudden it dawns on you that the whole world is constantly turning into ash. Like cigarette butts, yeah, but also like trees and mountains and people and nations and whales and marmosets. Like everything is decaying. It's crumbling all the time. It's turning into ash and into dust. And then while you're thinking about you remember the ritual of the church on Palm Sunday where they place ashes on the forehead and someone says, "Remember, O man, dust thou art, to dust you shall return." Right? And so you see that, and like maybe that comes as a vision in your mind, you know. And then, or as Chesterton put it when he said he had his poem in praise of dust, which it's sort of long, but it ends like this. He says, "The sunshine falls on one brown head. You too, O cold of clay, eater of stones, may haply hear the trumpets on that day. When God to all his paladins by his own splendor swore to make a fairer face than heaven of dust and nothing more." You know, and so you see like, oh, right, it's like where God made a fairer face than heaven of dust and nothing, of ash. And it returns to ash, but then like and you see this cycle, and it's like you can in that moment, like if you're on LSD or something, you might see that. You might see something you might see something horrible, but you know, but you have to be able to bring that back to the world. And you do that by having a discipleship in some sort of spiritual tradition, or in some, maybe in an art form, maybe both. There's a reason that monastics and stuff often is connected to the arts for that same reason, because they'd have their spiritual tradition and they have to express it to people through music, through paintings, through illuminating manuscripts. But people today can't do anything. Most people today have no skills at all, or if they do, they're skills in things that it's very hard to express yourself in. Like being good at spreadsheets is very useful, but it's hard to express divine knowledge in that, right?
Spiritually neutered discipline.
Yes, the great way of putting it. Spiritually neutered disciplines. So people need, and this is one of the real. This is the reason why craftsmanship is better than robotics and like doing everything automated. Automation has its place, right? It makes life better in many ways. But the reason you need to preserve craftsmanship is for that reason, so that people can express their insights of the divine.
It's also why writing a desk for your career is fundamentally inhumane.
Correct. Yes, this is where it connects to this is people are like, well, why shouldn't we do it? It's like, this is why. This is why you shouldn't make everything automated. Is because you have intimations of the divine, and God speaks to you and to other people, and you need skills to express that, right? Because not everyone can be good at speaking or singing songs. Like, we sort of understand it in like the explicit arts, but the other arts that are not as explicitly artsy, like making a table or doing needlepoint or whatever, or athletics or whatever. These things also can be used for that, but you have to, you have to have skill. Like this is like this country. We have people without skill. Like Alan Watts used to point out, he lived on a houseboat for a while. And he said, because of course he did. And he'd say in any harbor in America, you go around, what do you see? Aisle after aisle of sailboats docked in the harbor, going nowhere. Because people in this country have spiritually neutered skills, as you said, that get money, but they never learn how to do anything. And so they buy the sailboats, but then they don't know how to sail them, because it's difficult to learn to sail a boat properly, and it requires skill, and it takes time, and they don't have time because they're always at the thing doing their thing that's spiritually neutered to get money. And so everyone has the access to these beautiful things. Like everyone in America just about can afford a guitar. Very few people can play the guitar. Everyone in America could afford or whatever it is. But there is no pleasure in life without skill. It's something he would talk about a lot. When you're good at something, like really good at it, like there's just hedonism, which is pursuing sex and food and drugs, and hedonism is bad primarily because it gets boring so quickly. That's why people that are that sort of hedonist always need drugs to keep them going in that lifestyle. It gets old fast. Because there's only so much fine food you can eat before you're like, it's good. But like, what's really the joy in life is like when you're really good at something. And it's just flowing out of you effortlessly. Like you're breathing. And people are like, wow, how are you doing that? And you're just expressing all that within you is just coming out in this, just like you're walking, and you're crafting something, a beautiful table, or you are designing a house, or whatever it is. It may be something very simple. It may be crochet, it may be baking. But when it's just flowing out of you in this skillful way, that's really when you're getting into touch with something, and that's when you're really sort of vibing with the universe. That's when you're getting in touch with the fundamental playfulness of God, which people are. They want it to be more serious than that. But after all, as it says in Proverbs, the Lord brought me forth as the first of his works before his deeds of old. I was formed long ago, at the very beginning, when the world came to be. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his world and delighting in mankind. And so like the delight at the beginning was just rejoicing in the world and delighting in mankind, and filled with delight day after day. That was before the fall. And in fact, the Greeks, when I talk about the world is a play, the world is I say it's not that foreign to our tradition, because the Greeks describe the Trinity as perichoresis. I may be saying that wrong, but which means to go around and back and forth. It has the same root as choreography, choresis. So it was a divine dance. So they said the Trinity was God's divine dance, like his whirling around rejoicing. And so you know, that's deep down on some level, it isn't serious because like this game of like, oh no, black might win. You know, the cosmos, on the chessboard of the cosmos, evil might finally win. The darkness might, that's what everyone's worried about. But everyone knows it really can't. God can't really be defeated. But playing the game as though he could is how everything comes into being, like Heraclitus said. And so this is why, now here's where we get really controversial. Some of the church fathers would even go so far as to say, there's the right hand of God, and what's the left hand of God? Well, it's the demons. People are like, woof, but think about it. In terms of, like, a lot of the allegories used in the Bible is in terms of a judge and a prosecutor. And when you have a courtroom, you're in the court. There's God the Father. He's the judge, Father Almighty. And who sits on his right side but our one and only advocate, the Lord Jesus Christ. And he advocates for humanity. He's the defense. But of course, the left side, who sits on the left of the judge, the left-hand side is the prosecutor. And what is Satan called? He's the accuser. Is the prosecutor. That's what his name comes from. This is the accuser. He's the accusing one. So you have the advocate on one side, you have the accuser on the other. And that's because reality is made by but see, that people then they go, oh, well, so then the demons are good. No. But reality is made by a coming together and a casting away. You pull. That's what you do when you eat. You eat food, and that which can be integrated into the body is pulled into it, and it becomes you. And that which is not is cast away, like it's excrement is. So you have the right hand pulls in, the left hand cast away. The sheep and the goats. I pull in, I pull out. That's the duality: in and out, back and forth. Right, and so you. That's you're eating the food as a fractal truth of this larger pattern, right? Which is why you can have maybe some more hope in the universalism narrative of all things coming together than maybe you could have before, because it's the pulling, but that's a fractal all the way down, And anyway, maybe that's some things to think about, and maybe you can not get so. Stressed out about stuff, because it really is all God's plan. It's all going as it's supposed to, Whew.